Hello class. So let us proceed further with the remaining part of chapter 2, types of negotiable instruments. Yesterday we finished with the bills of exchange, its meaning, the parties and essentials, and also the same particulars for the promissory note. Now let us discuss the differentiating point between these two one by one. Number of parties, as we have seen yesterday. In case of bills of exchange, we have initially three parties: drawer, drawee, and pay. But in case of promissory note, number of parties are two: maker and the pay. Then nature of payment. The promissory note is an unconditional promise, whereas the bill of exchange is an unconditional order. Third, nature of liability. Now, who's liable to pay in case of the promissory note? It is the maker. And maker's liability is primary. He is himself promising that he shall be making this payment. Whereas in case of bills of exchange, the primary liability to pay is that of drawee. Drawer orders the drawee to make payment to the payee. So drawee is supposed to make the payment. In case he fails or he makes a default, then in case of his default, the secondary liability will be that of the drawer. Then is acceptance. So I just told you in the previous lecture that acceptance is required only in case of the bill of exchange. Promissory notes never requires any acceptance. Then immediate relationship between maker and payee. In case of promissory note, the maker and the payee, they have direct relationship. They have immediate relationship. Whereas in case of bill of exchange, immediate relationship is between the drawer and the drawee, and not between the drawer and the payee. Sixth, same identity of payer and payee. In case of bill of exchange, I told you that the drawer can order the drawee to make payment to the drawer himself. That means when the drawer and the drawer and the payee are one and the same person. So that can happen only in case of bill of exchange, because in case of promissory note, the payer and payee are always separate persons. The maker and payee are always different persons. Payable to bearer. The bill of exchange can be made payable to bearer, but the promissory note can never be made payable to bearer. Then written by debtor or creditor. Now we know in case of promissory note, the one who has to make payment, that means the debtor, he draws that promissory note. Whereas in case of the bill of exchange, the drawer or the maker of that bill of exchange is the creditor who has to get payment from you. He makes an order to you to make the said payment. Protest for dishonor. So I just told you about the concept of protest, noting and protesting for dishonor. This noting and protesting is done only in case of bills of exchange, and it is not done in case of the promissory note. Notice of dishonor also is required only in case of the bill of exchange, because in case of the promissory note, the maker himself knows that I am the one who has not made this payment if he makes a default. Whereas in case of bill of exchange, if the drawee has not made a payment, drawer will not be aware if the payee was a different person. So now payee on due date has not received the payment. He knows that the drawee has not made him the payment, but the drawer is not aware of this. So the notice of dishonor in that case is required to be done by the payee to the drawer. Drawn in sets. There's a concept of drawing the bills in sets. So bills are drawn in sets. Promissory notes are never drawn in sets. Now, what are these bills in sets will be explained further in the next topic. Conditional acceptance. So first of all, both the promissory note and the bill of exchange, they have to be unconditional promise or unconditional order. But the bill of exchange can be accepted conditionally. The acceptance done by the drawee may be a conditional acceptance. It cannot be drawn conditionally, but it can be accepted conditionally, which is not so in case of the promissory note, because there is no acceptance in case of the promissory notes. So this difference is very important. You may get such questions in your 5 marks short note questions. Moving further, the third part of this chapter is about the check. So check is defined under section 6, because section 4 and 5 they define promissory note and bill of exchange. Section 6 says check. Basically, check is a bill of exchange only. It's not a new instrument. It is a bill of exchange with two essential ingredients, which is a check is a bill of exchange which is drawn on a specified banker. That means it is that kind of a bill of exchange where drawee will always be a specific banker. Check is always an order by the customer of the bank to the bank to make the said payment, which is mentioned in that check. So, in that case, drawee is banker always. And second, not expressed to be payable otherwise than on demand. Check is always payable on demand. You always are supposed to go, present the bill, check, and get the payment. Payment is always on demand, which is not always so in case of bill of exchange. It may be there, it may not be there. Then check will also include the electronic checks. So now these days electronic checks are also issued, and then in that case the electronic image of truncated check will also be considered as check itself. That means check need not be in physical form only, but it can be in electronic form also, or it can be electronic image of a truncated check also. So more details about this truncated check and electronic check will be discussed in the later topics. Who are the parties? So parties, because it is a bill of exchange, parties will be three only: drawer, drawee, and payee. Drawer will always be a banker's customer who has been issued that checkbook and who has an account with that bank, he who has some balance with the bank, and he will be making the check and will be ordering the banker to make the payment to a drawee. Sorry, to make a payment to a payee. In case you mention pay to self, then pay is a drawer himself. In case you mention somebody else's name, then the pay becomes a third person. But drawee will always be the banker and a specified banker. And you all know that on the check, there's always the name of the bank, the branch code, etc. is always printed. So it is always clear that this is check which is to be honored by a specified bank. Then what are the essentials of a valid check? So all the essentials of bill of exchange will be the essentials of the check. So I will not repeat all these. But in addition to that, it has some additional essentials too. This also we have discussed just above. It is always drawn on a specified banker and it is always payable on demand. Now coming to difference between check and bill of exchange. So first difference, section 5 and 6. Second difference, their respective definitions or meaning. Other differences, drawee. In case of check, drawee will always be a specified banker. It is not so in case of bill of exchange. Payable on demand or not. Bill of exchange may or may not be payable on demand, but the check will always be payable on demand. Acceptance. Bill of exchange always require acceptance. Check never requires an acceptance because issuing of checkbook is an implied acceptance that in case the drawer will be writing a check, the check will honor that payment on that check subject to the availability of balance in the account of that person, subject to the signatures of the customer matching with the specimen signatures in the custody of bank, and some more rules that we'll be discussing later on. Crossing. There's a concept of crossing of check which is there in case of checks only. Bill of exchange never have any crossing. Payable to bearer on demand. Now we have done one common essential in case of promissory note and bill of exchange, that both of them they cannot be made payable to bearer on demand. They can be payable to bearer or they can be payable on demand, but they cannot be both payable to bearer as well as on demand as per section 31 of RBI Act. But in case of check, there's no such condition. Checks can be made payable to bearer on demand because they always are payable on demand and we can always issue bearer checks also. Stamp. This also I have just discussed in presumptions that it is a promissory note and the bill of exchange which requires stamp, but such stamps are not there in case of check. Notice of dishonor. Notice of dishonor is required to be done in case of bill of exchange. In case of check, it is not so required because in case the banker has dishonored, Banker always will dishonor in case amount is not sufficient or your signatures are not matching or it is a stale check, etc. So in that case, bankers, they have a reason to uh, dishonor your check. Then they do intimate you for in that regard. Then discharge of draws liability in case of non-presentment for payment. Now the due date has come for the payment. In that case, the person who has to receive payment, he has to present the check for payment. Unless he presents the check, payment will not be given to him. So in case the check is not presented, drawer cannot be held liable for non-presentment of check. And in that case, the person who was to receive that payment on check, he will get the payment on check in this case also, even if he has not presented it. But the same situation will not be there in case of bills of exchange. That means in case of bills of exchange, if you do not present it for payment, the other person is not bound to make you payment later on. 3 days of grace. This you must be knowing as per accounting of bills of exchange, that we add 3 days of grace in case of bills of exchange, also in case of promissory note, but no such days of grace are added to count the due date in case of the check, because check is payable on demand. Noting and protesting also we discussed is required only in case of the bills of exchange, not in checks. Countermanding. Countermanding payment is an order by the drawer of the check to the banker to stop payment on a specific check. Now, checks always are having some check number. Now, in case you have written a check, signed it also, filled the amount also, then that check got misplaced. Now, you have a fear that this check may fall into the hands of somebody and he may get payment on that check. So, in that case, you can quickly inform your banker, tell them the check number, and ask them to stop payment on this check if this check comes on their counter for collection of the payment of the check. So this is called countermanding payment. So this provisioning of countermanding of payment is only there in case of the checks and not in case of the bills of exchange. Now some additional types of bills of exchange. First, accommodation bill. So a bill of exchange is always issued, is always drawn when you have to get some payment from the other person. So you order that person that I'm giving you a credit right now. You owe me some amount, and for that amount you don't have cash. Okay, I write this bill on this. You accept it, and then on due date you can make this payment. Now that person will make payment on the due date. But sometimes, just to financially help a friend or a known person, you may not be bound to make any payment to other person, but to help that person, you may write a bill, which is accommodation bill. So accommodation bill is the bill which is drawn and accepted without any consideration, just to oblige your friends. So in that case, the person who wants to help you, he will say, you draw a bill on me, I will accept it. And then you want that money, I don't have money to help you. You take my accepted bill and you get it discounted from the banker. And on due date, when payment will be due, I will have to make payment to bank. You give this money back to me, and then I will make the payment to the bank. So this way you will be helped also, and I will also be in a position to pay back the money to the banker, because the bill was discounted by you. So in this case, a drawer and drawee, they don't have any relationship of debtor and creditor. They are only accommodating each other. So in this case, although it is not drawn for consideration, but we'll presume consideration is present. Nobody knows about this back picture going on, that somebody was drawing it for helping somebody else. So in that case, it will be treated as a normal check, normal bill only, and the parties will be helping each other. So the party who is accommodating you is called accommodation party, and the party who's being accommodated or being helped is called the accommodated party. Second is fictitious bill. Fictitious bill means a bill in which case the either the drawer or the payee, or both the persons, they are fictitious. There's no drawer, there's no payee. A person has drawn a fictitious bill, drawn with a fictitious name, drawn on himself, accepted himself, and then use that for endorsing or discounting further. So when a person mentioned as a party is non-existing or is a pretended person, that becomes a fictitious bill. So whosoever has accepted that bill, he still will be liable to pay to the order of the person who signed it as a drawer. And in case this fictitious bill gets transferred further and somebody gets as an endorsee, then that endorsee can also recover the amount as against the acceptor, provided he can prove that the signatures of the pretended drawer and the signature of the first endorser, they are in the same handwriting. So that means it was a fictitious bill will be proved. So in such cases, you can use a fictitious bill also. People make such fictitious bills and they just use this phenomenon to get this kind of use of this kind of fictitious bill. Documentary bill and clean bill. So sometimes you purchase something, you send the document of title of that product. Along with that, you also send the bill of exchange to be accepted by the customer for the due payment. So now you are sending these goods carrier, through a carrier or through a middleman, etc., some transporter, etc. So you can also issue the documents of title and you can attach a bill of exchange with this, and you can put a condition on the carrier that unless that bill of exchange is accepted by the customer, you will not hand over these documents to the other person. So this way you can secure your payment. So similar situation we have discussed in Sale of Goods Act, the topic of the reservation of right of disposal. So it is the same concept. In case the bill of exchange is sent without document of title, it is called clean bill. Fourth is bill in sets. So I just explained to you that bill can be in sets, drawn in sets. Promissory notes are never drawn in sets. So what is bill in set is, in this case, it happens in case of foreign trade that the goods are to come from far off places. Then you also send your bill of exchange, and you may fear that bill of exchange might get lost because it has to come from far off place and maybe some handling issues are there and you do not get that bill of exchange on time. So in that case, you can send the same bill of exchange with 3 copies, having the number and mention about the other 2 sets also through different posts or through different couriers, so that at least any one of them will reach the person. So in that case, in case that person gets 1 copy, then he can use it for the further transactions. But in case he gets all the 3 together, then only one will be valid. He has to accept only one. If by mistake he accepts all the 3 copies, then all the 3 copies become 3 different separate independent bill of exchange. Then he will have to make payment on all the 3 bills. So this kind of caution they have to take. So these are different kinds of bill of exchange. Some more instruments which are strictly speaking not negotiable instruments, but they are somehow related. So let us study them. Bank draft or demand draft. We all know about this. That sometimes we have to make a demand draft. For example, you have to apply for reevaluation of your exam, and now you are doing it online. Then you have to send a postal order, I guess. But earlier it used to be a bank draft. You will go to your bank. Either the bank you will pay cash, or they will deduct amount from your bank account in the same bank, and they will issue you a bank draft, which is a bill of exchange drawn by a banker on its branch. So in that case, both the parties are bankers, the drawer and the drawee. So you have to give the revaluation fees to the university. So you will draw that, you will get that bank draft in the name of the branch given by the university, and that bank draft will be attached with your revaluation form, and then that payment will be collected by their bank as per the amount which you have deposited here. So this is a bank draft. So features are, it is always drawn by a banker upon its branch. It cannot be by a private person. Then it is always payable on demand. It cannot be made payable to bearer on demand because it is always drawn on a banker, a branch, specific branch. And unlike check, there cannot be any countermanding. Once you have made your payment, draft has been made, you cannot now cancel it. Now the cash has gone. That demand draft will go waste. Otherwise, you cannot countermand the payment on that. Traveler's check, so not use much used these days. Now we have ATM facility with us. Earlier, when people used to travel, they used to carry traveler checks, in which they used to encash those checks at the place where they wanted to go, because it was not safe to carry cash along. Now there's no need of such traveler's check, because now we have facility of ATMs. Gift check, you want to give any gift, money gift to somebody. So in that case, you can issue a prepaid gift check, and that person can get the payment on that check by depositing that in their account. Escrow. Escrow is a kind of a bill of exchange which is conditionally accepted. That much is enough. Letter of credit. Letter of credit is a letter which is issued by a banker to its customer whose financial standing is good, and they issue this letter of credit because that customer of the bank, they he wants to prove his credit worthiness before any other party. Now the other party is not willing to give them any credit because they are not sure payment will be done or not. So in that case, this person can get a LC or letter of credit issued by their banker, which states that banker mentions there that this person has sufficient balance in his account, and in case you issue any check on his name, that check will be honored up to this much amount. So that shows that this person is competent financially to make payment and he will not make any default. So these are some additional instruments which were part of this chapter, types of negotiable instruments. Thank you.